has COVID. Dan Mullen a couple weeks ago acknowledged the same thing. Then Texas A&M paused. That means they want to take it to make sure they're going to be careful. They have a game this weekend against Tennessee. And then Mississippi State and Auburn got wiped off the board for next week, for this Saturday, postponed until later in the season. And then the big one you mentioned, Alabama and LSU hangs in the balance. So I spoke last night to Commissioner Greg Sankey and asked him a similar question, and he said right now we are going to stay the course. So we've had fairly good luck in terms of games being postponed or canceled. A couple of outbreaks a few weeks ago with Florida, but right now that's the answer. But as everyone here knows, the LSU-Alabama game is always one of the biggest games in college football, and if it doesn't go off, it very likely won't, because LSU has already missed a game because of COVID. Their game against Florida has been pushed to December 12th, which SEC has reserved for makeup games. And you would hate to see that game not be played. However, with the way LSU is playing, it probably won't make much difference. They may get to avoid a loss, because the national champions are spiraling out of control right now with 3 losses already.
Paul, I don't know if you heard about it, but Commissioner Greg Sankey told Paul Finebaum on the Paul Finebaum show that that things are uncomfortable. That, like you talk about that Thanksgiving date and the way things are going, and they may have to kind of recalibrate how they're going to get through this. How do they get through this? Is it like a little SEC tournament and scrap some parts of the season to try to get some kind of playoff or something going before it's too late? How much pressure is on in terms of the time right now?
Well, all along, the commissioner, who was very wise in his approach to the season, remember, he was one of the first ones to say, we can't play Labor Day weekend. We'll start September 26th. While we all know the Pac-12 and the Big Ten just said, we're not playing at all, which they now are, and it turned out to be a mess. So he's been cautious. He's wanted to get to December 19th, which is the SEC championship game, as the threshold of whether this season was a success or not, and ultimately the playoffs, which come 10 days after that and then into January. So I don't think at this point it's going to shut down. But Max, you and I and everyone watching knows the reality of the situation. These numbers get worse by the day. They're rising exponentially. And with students about to get sent home for Thanksgiving, does that help or hurt getting them off the campus? It's hard to say. Nick Saban said something very interesting yesterday. He had an off week this past Saturday. He said, I didn't want to send my players home knowing what they could encounter. We all know what that means. And he said, but I had to let them go. I admonished them to be very careful. But the issue isn't so much college football right now. It's the environment. And day by day, it gets worse and worse.
Well, you alluded to the environment, Paul. What were your thoughts about the students storming the field once Notre Dame had beaten Clemson? Because in light of that happening, they know what times we're in. They're not children. I mean, they're kids, grown kids, but still relatively young. The bottom line is this. It didn't appear to be the wisest thing. What kind of damage do you think that may have done to the specter of college football continuing in light of those kids electing to storm the field?
It was a terrible look, but let me say a couple of things, Stephen A. At the age of 18 or 19, I'm sure I would have done the same thing. I'll tell you what bothered me the most. And I went to Catholic high school, and I was taught to respect clergy. But I'm going to say something about Father Jenkins, who is the president of Notre Dame, and theoretically one of the most respected people in intercollegiate athletics and in high academia. This man called out those students in a letter, admonishing them, coming after them. But you guys know where I'm going here. He was at the White House a month ago. He was at the outdoor the outdoor announcement of Amy Coney Barrett as the next Supreme Court justice. She's a Notre Dame graduate and a professor there. And he was sitting there with everyone else, we've all seen the pictures, without a mask. And guess what? The president of Notre Dame contracted COVID. So I have a hard time coming down on the students when he did essentially the same thing and now being hypocritical as you can possibly be, admonishing those students. It was a bad look, I agree, but come on.
But he's not one to talk. He's not one to talk.
Yeah. Gotta wear your mask. Gotta wear your mask. Let's keep it moving here. I want to get to Michigan. Jim Harbaugh's Wolverines are 1-2 this season with 2 consecutive losses to Michigan State and Indiana. Harbaugh has only 1 more year left on his contract. Paul, has Harbaugh been a success or failure at Michigan?
Jim Harbaugh has become a Saturday Night Live parody at Michigan. He has not been a success unless you like to laugh. And I do. And watching him has been hilarious because he is not an elite coach anymore. He was when he got there, remember. He was at the 49ers. He took them to a couple of NFC championship games and the Super Bowl, losing to his brother. But even though the record, the overall record is still pretty good there, his matchups against his big rival, Ohio State, everyone in America knows he hasn't beaten them. He's 500 against his in-state rival. And this year, losing to Michigan State and then Indiana. And I realize Indiana's a good program. I'm not here to knock them. But I just think it's spiraled out of control. And, you know, as you said, with another year to go, what credibility does he have if they bring him back? I know they don't want to fire him. He's a favorite son. He was a former quarterback. But it's time. It's time to end this farce. It really is.
What does you think it is, Paul? When he first went, he's going to coach Michigan, I'm thinking to myself, that's actually perfect because in the NFL he had a lot of success, but he seemed to burn his players out. I thought, at least, watching from afar after 3 or 4 years, too much intensity. Well, perfect, go to college because these kids are going to cycle through in that time. Then you got a new crop of kids. You'd think you'd be able to recruit. It's a program that at least thinks of itself as very important. What happened? Did he forget how to coach? Like, what happened to Harbaugh?
I think he's too stubborn, Max. Nick Saban, to bring him up if the court will indulge me here, is a defensive-minded coach. He hated the tempo offense. He tried to get the rules changed, and then he decided to hire Lane Kiffin and then start recruiting Tunga Vailoa and others, and he decided, I have to change. I can't compete with the Clemsons, and I can't compete with other schools if I don't. And look at them now. They haven't won every national championship, but he's won quite a few. He's won 6 overall and 5 at Alabama, and he's number 1 in the country right now. Jim Harbaugh just doesn't change. He just keeps beating his head against the wall, thinking that whatever used to work is going to work. And I think ultimately his stubbornness has gotten in the way of his success.
So let me be clear and pin you down, Paul Finebaum, on this particular issue. Are you saying that Jim Harbaugh needs to be gone from Michigan? Are you saying that no college program, no elite college program needs to think about bringing him on board? Or are you saying his days as a head coach, period, on the collegiate or the professional level should be over? Specifically, what are you saying?
Thanks for the question. I think his days at Michigan should be over. They need a change. He needs a change. I don't think there's a major college that would hire him because he does come with baggage now. But I do think, Stephen A., there's a shot, a very narrow shot, but somebody in the NFL, one of these billionaire owners would look at Harbaugh and say, maybe he would work. I mean, certainly if Jerry Jones had hired him last year, things couldn't be any worse. I know I'm preaching to the choir. You know what I would love? Can you imagine Jim Harbaugh in New York for the Jets? For the Jets. I'm not suggesting. I'm just throwing it up in the air. Jim Harbaugh and the New York media would be something that I would love to see. But I think there's someone in the NFL that will hire Jim Harbaugh.
Okay.
Yeah. Stephen A. doesn't want him in New York with us, clearly. Well, Keyshawn was just on the show. I think it was Monday.
Listen, Stephen.
Yeah, and said to the Cowboys, he'd like to see Harbaugh go to the Cowboys. So that definitely subject was broached at one point.
The Jets are so bad, they need to find new water boys.
Yeah,
That's how bad they are.
You can't make them worse.
No, that's true.
Oh, they need to find new water boys. Okay, that's where we'll leave it. Thank you, Paul.